Today I would like to talk about 5 different signs that show you if your life is controlled by your past conditioning. Past conditioning revolves around learned behaviors, emotional triggers, and our personal belief system that were instilled in us during our upbringing, in any type of often toxic or abusive relationship, or within communities such as religious institutions, the military, or other areas where adaptation is required or expected from those who need to be in control over the conditioned individuals, so to speak. Our past conditioning is basically like a computer programming that is installed in our mind and body, that's running on autopilot and that we have little to no control of when it takes over. Since it's so deeply ingrained in us, we think that when our conditioning is being activated, it's just normal and that's just who we are. Until we hit a point in our lives where things have become so difficult and unbearable that we start asking questions. Maybe you've committed to therapy where you began unraveling all of those questions and peeled away the layers of your conditioning and get to the core of the problems that you have been facing for so long. So what are the typical signs that you may be suffering from past conditioning? First of all, a quite obvious one is to have low self-worth or low self-esteem. Many survivors of narcissistic abuse were always kept small and made to doubt their own good qualities and abilities. Condescension was something we almost saw ourselves confronted with on the daily, while nothing we did was ever good enough. Sure, every now and then there was a compliment here or there, but it was usually connected to meeting high expectations or conditions. Having been a target of bullying or being labeled the black sheep of the family in younger years is not uncommon to develop a low view of oneself. You understand you are different from the rest and begin to isolate, over-apologize for just existing or taking up space, and never deem it necessary to have your own needs met. Which leads me to my next point. People-pleasing is certainly a very common habit among those who grew up invalidated and made to feel invisible or inadequate about themselves. It is by pleasing others or making other people's lives easier that we can only feel seen, essential, or good about ourselves. But if we were blunt and honest to ourselves in these situations, our motivation to help and please others is often very selfish, because it's not so much about making the other person happy, but more importantly, the fact that feeling needed makes us feel happy instead. There's also a very dark side to being the nice person all the time. Putting your own needs last, if you're even aware of your own needs, can easily grow into resentment over time because others will take advantage of your good nature while, in fact, you're just too afraid to express your own thoughts or opinions, let alone set the right boundaries that protect you from such harm and exploitation to begin with. Some people go as far as getting involved in criminal activities for another person, even though they know it's inherently the wrong thing to do and that it can be quite dangerous to themselves and others. Another indicator that past conditioning is running your life is that you are a known overachiever. You may be highly career-driven and always searching for the next big achievement. Once you've reached a goal, you're already bored and strive for the next one. I found myself in that position and used to be that die-hard workaholic. I needed to be successful at everything I did, or else I would feel like a complete failure. However, I wasn't competitive. That was never my mindset. I just followed my own path. I was in constant competition with myself, or maybe that voice in my head telling me who I should be. It all started when I entered elementary school as a kid. Don't get me wrong, I liked going to school and learning new things. I was a nerd and, ultimately, the teacher's pet. A's and B's would come naturally to me, but because of this, it would soon become everyone's expectation. My mother used intermittent reinforcement, a form of conditioning, to keep it that way. Intermittent reinforcement basically means that if you perform as expected, you will get rewarded, and if not, you will get either punished or ignored. So whenever I brought home an A or a B, I was rewarded, usually with money. Anything worse than that, and I was scolded and made to feel ashamed of myself. I know this was only a mistake. Next time you do better again, is what she used to say. Of course, this type of conditioning translated into my adult life. I continued going to school next to my job that was already taking up a lot of my time. I was always on the hunt to add a new credential to my resume, until I was completely burned out and fell for a malignant narcissist during those vulnerable times, who would become my partner and try to compete with me. The next sign that your life is run by past conditioning are emotional triggers and reactive behavior. One of the most important lessons we learn on our healing journey is that we need to respond rather than react. But if a situation or something that is being done or said to us reminds us of an unfair person or an event in the past, our unresolved trauma kicks in and we lose our sense of self-control. With healing, these triggers can be resolved, or at least minimized and controlled. But remember that you cannot heal in the same environment that made you feel sick in the first place. In other words, if you do not stay away from those who created or programmed these triggers in you, for instance, family members or a former partner, then it's easy to fall for their manipulation again, and the same triggers you thought you had healed will be resurfacing. I notice the same thing happening when I reconnect with toxic people of my past who haven't changed one bit of their old ways. It's important to maintain boundaries with these people, but I also noticed how very easy it can be for them to pierce through my boundaries sometimes and drag me back to an old place and time where I don't belong anymore. Every time, it's as if your wounded inner child returns. So sadly, no contact is often the only answer to live peacefully and stay sane. And the fifth and probably most obvious sign that your life is run by your past conditioning is that you keep finding yourself in the same or similar toxic relationship patterns again and again. And this is not only pertaining to intimate relationships with your partners, but also new friendships or work relationships. Any type of relationship always brings up our previous conditioning to the surface. But it's up to ourselves to notice these patterns and self-harming habits in order to finally break them. It's one of the reasons why it's also so very difficult to leave these types of relationships, because all this pain and drama involved is simply what we've been used to and what we've deemed as normal for so long. They say that breaking old patterns is very difficult, especially when you've reached a certain age, but it's not impossible. So how do you break free from past conditioning? The first step to anything is awareness. That's not only becoming aware of your own conditioning per se, but especially when it is being activated in your day-to-day life. If you frequently feel misunderstood, triggered, unappreciated, exhausted, unhappy, or sad, these feelings could be indicators that your life is running on autopilot of past conditioning, whilst ignoring the needs of your authentic self. If you lack healthy decision-making and have a tendency to make decisions that go against your own best interests, your own will and values in life, this could be a sign as well. It's crucial to confront these negative feelings in your past, even though it's hard. When I entered counseling, I had no idea this was even going on, let alone that this was the main problem that I had been struggling with all my life. In fact, my counselor didn't even want to address anything that was currently going on, but talk about my past, because it was clear to her that there was an underlying reason why I kept entertaining toxic or even abusive people and situations in my life. Like a computer program that needed to be rewritten or freed from bugs, so to speak. In therapy, they often call it reparenting ourselves, which means we give ourselves what our parents were lacking to provide us with, such as love and understanding, compassion and boundaries. Journaling helped me a lot during my healing journey. Not only did it help me to reflect on any toxic situation I would still find myself in, but also to mentally process and dissect what was going on. This way, I could detect toxic patterns much faster and reparent or recondition myself to respond differently over time. So yeah, these were 5 typical signs that your life is controlled by your past conditioning and ways to break this pattern. Thank you very much for listening, stay safe, and have a great day.